You're with the Sound of Ideas from IdeaStream Public Media. I'm Stephanie Haney. Thank you for staying with us. Several weeks ago, it was announced that the Heinen's grocery store in downtown Cleveland, located in the historic Cleveland Trust Bank building, will be closing its doors. The store reported that it's lost $18 million over the last 11 years it was open. The last day of operation will be July 31st. That closure means that Constantino's Market, which has been operating in the Warehouse District in downtown Cleveland for just over 20 years, will be the sole grocery store serving downtown Cleveland residents. The closure raises bigger questions about the profitability of grocery stores, how much of a population is required to keep a store afloat, and the overall changing habits of shoppers. That's the focus of today's installment of The Menu, our series produced in partnership with Cleveland Magazine, focusing on the region's food scene. With me for this conversation today, we have Andrew Revy, the CEO of Constantino's Grocery Store, as well as Immigrant Son Brewery in Lakewood. Andrew, welcome.
Good morning.
Great to have you here. Also with us, we have Dylan Stewart. He's the editor at Cleveland Magazine, with us often for The Menu. Dylan, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And we have Mark Rulli, co-owner of Rulli Brothers Italian Markets and Grocery Stores, joining us as well. Hi, Mark.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Glad to have you here. Now, before we begin, I should note that we did invite Heinen's to be a part of this conversation, but they did decline. If you want to join the conversation, you can call us at 866-578-0903. You can also email us at soi@ideastream.org, or you can message us on Instagram at The Sound of Ideas. Now, Andrew, last year was a big anniversary for Constantino's, 20 years in the Warehouse District. How have you seen things change in the downtown location over those 2 decades?
There's been a lot of changes, not the least of which is the population growth. 20 years ago, when the store first opened, we were, I think, leading the charge of growth economically to entice people to move downtown and the revival of moving back to the urban core. But also the biggest change since we've opened has been the impact of COVID. Again, massive change in population, but that was more the daily transient population, the daytime workers and employees that were downtown pre-COVID that just aren't there post-COVID.
Are we seeing a return back in that foot traffic? How is that looking lately?
Significantly more than during COVID, but it's still not the pre-COVID numbers. I think if I'm, as far as I know, pre-COVID, it was roughly about 125,000 transient daily population, and we're probably about 50% of that post-COVID. So it's been a very difficult few years.
Well, I can tell you this. When I moved back to Cleveland, which was in fall of 2019, just before COVID, Constantino's Market was my lifesaver. I lived on West 9th Street. The salsa there, to die for. So just throwing that out there from my personal experience, it was very beneficial for me as someone who didn't have a car at the time when I moved back from New York City and didn't have a car. So I know that's a factor that will be in consideration for a lot of people with the closure of Heinen's downtown, be coming over there more. Dylan, what has your reporting in Cleveland Magazine shown in terms of the ability of businesses to survive in the downtown area? Restaurants, coffee shops, bouncing back from the pandemic, struggling. What are you seeing?
Yeah, it's pretty much everyone that we talk to is struggling a little bit, in terms of retail, restaurants. It's we recently saw the closure of Clevo Books. I also talked to James Orlando, who owns 2 coffee shops in the Playhouse Square district, and he said that there's about a fraction of the foot traffic that he was seeing in that area. I talked to Rocco Whalen as well. James told me that he really felt that Heinen's was the main driver between like East 17th to East 4th, the main driver that he was seeing with foot traffic going by that were bringing him into his coffee shop in the Statler the Brass Moon. And Rocco Whalen is really excited about Sherwin-Williams coming down, but really most office workers were only back in about April, and he hasn't seen the sort of influx of business that he was hoping. He's still optimistic, and he said for him it's been an uphill battle, but there's ways that he's gotten creative, such as adding a $20 express meal, which is like a half sandwich, soup, salad, things like that. But just the pure sense of needing to get creative, I think, speaks to that lack of foot traffic, lack of happy hour business, lack of lunch business.
And with Sherwin-Williams, they're referring to Sherwin-Williams headquarters being in downtown Cleveland in the public square area and having a policy that's been widely reported that their workers do need to return in office, so bringing those people back into the downtown space. Mark, Rulli Brothers started out in downtown Youngstown more than 100 years ago, did move to the suburbs where you've had 2 locations for the last several decades. Can you tell us about the decision to move to the suburbs?
Well, at the time, it wasn't exactly our decision. The downtown Youngstown is a lot different than the Cleveland history. Population shifted, was maybe beginning to shift at that time. This was the late 60s, and they began what was called urban renewal. And they started focusing more on the government offices down there and creating more parking. Essentially, that's how we got forced out of the area. But obviously, the population was shifting to the suburbs at that time. My dad anticipated that, he just passed recently, and he was the leader of the company for over 60 years. And that's how we ended up in the suburbs, and we've transitioned now. We're 6 decades into the suburbs, but there's a lot of different things that are going on in the industry in general, especially for independent grocers. And we're seeing this in the suburbs. And I'm sure it has a lot of truth to what's going on in the urban areas as well, as far as a lot of regional, national chains moving into the area. I think they're all in the middle of a turf war, and we're kind of caught in between, but at the same time, independent stores are really, you find your niche. We have our own banner. We don't run a corporate banner. We have an identification with the community that's gone on now for 100 years.
Some of those things that you're talking about there with the national change, we know that Kroger just bought Giant Eagle. That's something that will certainly have an impact. We'll have to wait and see what that will be. Andrew, you're in the restaurant industry and also in the grocery industry. We always hear about tight margins in restaurants. Can you tell us a little bit about what that looks like in the grocery world?
Sure. I'm sure Mark can speak to this as well. The grocery business is extremely tight margins. In 2025, the average grocery net operating margin was 2.1%. So to put that into perspective, a $100 cart brings you about $2. And so the business is predicated on volume, and that's why foot traffic is extremely important. These margins and with rising costs, really eat into it. And so, once you have that cart and that ring, you still have to take care of labor, you have to take care of rent, utilities, and there's not much left over. And it's become extremely difficult and extremely tight. And when there's been a shifting change in population and the rising costs, it's made it extremely tough to operate.
And the Constantino's Market Building, is that owned or rented?
We rent there, yeah.
Okay.
We're in the Bingham Building, and we're a leasehold operation.
Okay. And for you, Mark, one of your locations is owned and one of them is rented. Do you think that makes a difference? We know that the Heinen's location was rented here in downtown. How does that play into things?
Well, I think the way you plan for your budget obviously goes a lot more into owning your own building. We have a pretty large, we have like 15 acres that our building's on. We have a 52,000 square foot building. So you have all those extra costs, expenses as they're called in the industry, that aren't factored into your product cost or your labor cost. It's a whole separate cost. And in some ways, it's good to have your own building because you obviously have your own control over everything. And in other ways, when you have a landlord, they take care of a lot of those expenses for you.
Dylan, you're a former downtown resident. What do you think about the closure of downtown Heinen's? What will that mean to the downtown Cleveland area?
Yeah, so I lived downtown. I lived in the Statler, and I worked in Playhouse Square. So Heinen's was a lifeline to me. And I lived downtown sort of, I think, in what a lot of people are looking at as the glory days, like 2016, 2017, 2018. And I've joked that I didn't even need to turn off the stove to run across the street and get, an ingredient I might have forgotten. And Heinen's was so often where we ate lunch, and it would be hard at lunchtime during the work week to sit down, to even find a table to sit down at to get prepared foods and things. But I've talked to some residents, some friends who live down there now, and you know, they really feel like they've lost an essential lifeline, especially for those who live more on the east side of downtown. Already, it was hard because Heinen's had started shifting their model to more of a grab and go model, and had less options for full-fledged grocery shopping. It was also very expensive, and with expensive rent, a lot of young professionals living downtown, a lot of people were already leaving downtown to get some, you know, canned goods and things like that, maybe at an Aldi's or a Dave's, and grabbing, you know, more of the fresh produce and things like that at Heinen's. So I'm interested to see maybe if that kind of model is more fitting for downtown. I know that's sort of the model that you guys have. But for me, I was doing a lot of my grocery shopping there just because it was so convenient.
Mm-hmm. Well, Constantino's did celebrate a very exciting anniversary, 20 years. So, Andrew, what do you see for the future of Constantino's in the warehouse district?
Well, we hope to be around for 20 more at least, and I think that it is a good possibility, and there is still a vibrancy downtown, and there still is a decent amount of people, and there are always shifting landscapes for business. I think Heinen's leaving does leave a large hole in the retail space, and you know, I hope that there is an anchor tenant that goes there as well, because we are part of the downtown. We want to celebrate another 20 years. So we do think that some good things will be happening. I think the city of Cleveland is, along with other partners that are vested in, are working really hard to find another anchor tenant, and we're here for that, and we're here for the continued growth. So
Sure. All right, this is how we close out the menu. Every single time we ask you what you're eating this weekend. We'll start with Dylan because he's a veteran, so that you too have time to think. Dylan, what are you eating this weekend?
So I'm really excited about the Coyne family, who owns Crowley's and some coffee shops on the east side and things like that. They just opened an Irish pub called Carney's, and you know, that my family's part Irish. Their dive bars are actually Irish and Croatian, which is the two sides of my family, which is just, you know, I never thought I'd see the day, but they do a great job there. So I'm really excited to go to Carney's and try that out in Menor. They've got a lot of fresh fish options and you know, the classic Irish fare. So
Okay. Andrew, besides Immigrant Son, besides Sophia's Kitchen and Bar, where are you eating this weekend?
this weekend, I'm actually going to make a family dinner at home. Grab some great stuff from Constantino's Market, and I'm probably going to make my daughter's favorite, and we'll probably linguine and clams.
Okay, linguine and clams. Sounds good. Mark, how about for you?
Actually, this weekend, I'm going to have the opportunity to take my wife on a little trip, and we're going to Lake Chautauqua and probably eat at the Harbor Restaurant there, the older restaurant. And I have not perused the menu yet, but I'm sure it's going to be good.
Okay, well, here's a plug for our Easy Day Away series. We just featured Chautauqua and Jamestown in New York, so you can check that out. We've got another Easy Day Away series coming up next week, so look out for that. Thank you very much for our panel here for this edition of The Menu. Andrew Revy, CEO of Constantino's Market, also of Immigrant Son Brewery and Sophia's Kitchen and Bar. Thank you, and congratulations on the anniversary.
Thank you, and thanks for having me.
Dylan Stewart, the editor of Cleveland Magazine. Dylan, as always, thank you.
always great to be here.
And Mark Rulli, co-owner of Rulli Brothers Italian Markets and Grocery. Mark,
Thank you so much.
We appreciate it.